Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and I'm thrilled to introduce you, or reintroduce you, to a previous guest, Raj Pillai, author of a new book called Lost Lions, A Search to Find God's Script for Your Life. Raj is an artist who uses the tools of words, ideas, and thoughts. He believes God has endowed every human being with a unique set of inherent gifts and potential, but each of us needs a catalyst to ignite that potential. It is his mission to kindle that potential in every person who comes in contact with him, his work, and his life. While he currently serves as a pastor of a growing church, his passion for people goes far beyond the church walls. As an author, speaker, and a consultant to both Christian and secular organizations, many would also consider him a cultural anthropologist at his core. Today, he and his family call Clarksburg, Maryland home, here to talk about his latest book, Lost Lions, A Search to Find God's Script for Your Life, is returning guest Raj Pillai. Raj, welcome back to Revealing the Truth.
Well, thank you so much for having me on your show.
Well, it's great to have you. Give us a little bit of the background of what got you to become this cultural anthropologist. You come from we talked about your family background from India and coming to America, you being raised in America, and adaptations and you were raised in a Christian home, so this was really not anything that was a cultural clash for you, as many who come out of Hinduism or Sikhs or others make the transition. There's huge clashes in the cultural to anthropological side. Shrines, images, various practices really collide, but that's not been your case. So kind of walk us a little bit through your background.
Yeah, so I grew up in a church in Calcutta, which was founded by a missionary couple from India, Mark and Huldah Buntain. And so I grew up in a Christian home at a church from a very young age. And but when I came here for my higher studies at Eastern University in Philadelphia, it's a Christian school right outside Philadelphia, one of the subjects that really intrigued me was cultural anthropology. And it was being taught by Dr. Menezes, who is the daughter of the famous missionary Paul Hebert. And he was actually a missionary in India. And so she was raised as a kid in India, and she led that class, and it just sparked an interest in me about learning about different cultures, the richness of different cultures and backgrounds and perspectives. That class really ignited a passion in me for people groups and how people around the world, in so many ways we are similar, in so many ways we are different. And how do we understand, and also how do we overcome these barriers that naturally come up when people from different cultures and backgrounds and races and groups interact together. So all these sort of was ignited on the campus of Eastern University, and so I started to enter into the world of other people, started to get to know people from different backgrounds. I had several friends from Africa. One of my dearest friends growing up was he's of pure Portuguese and British descent. He immigrated to London, so I've been there many times. I love the historical side of Europe, and so it allowed me to just see people, interact with people from many different cultures, and appreciate the background and richness of perspective. So
it's interesting that you say that, because as a Bible lover as you are, and a truly cultural anthropologist, and I view you that way because you do embrace and dig in and get to know. But the concept of ethnos, which is what we're talking about, is a very negative thing. Ethnos is a Greek concept of creating the ideal human being. In God's economy, in the Bible, there's only two races, Jew and Gentile. There's no such thing as an Indian. There's no such thing as
Right.
An African, an Ethiopian. The Moabites were Gentiles. They were just Jews and Gentiles. And being a Gentile didn't mean you were a pagan. Being a Jew didn't mean that you were not a pagan. It was just two people groups. But then we got into this anthropological, who's the superior race? And then all of a sudden we have this ethnos concept.
Right.
And, well, it was the Greek philosophers, and because it was Aristotle and Plato and Socrates, and so we should expand our minds, and we did so to the point of Adolf Hitler, and we did so to the point of the first Ayatollah that changed Persia to Iran, which means Aryan in Arabic, and all of a sudden we became this racially divided world instead of this body of unity, and we allowed it to creep into humanity when God, not only did he have a seed line to Jesus, which were the Jews, he also had a seed path for the Gentiles, which was to join together with the seed line to create one new man.
Yeah. And what you just said reminded me of Ephesians, where Paul writes, Jesus himself is our peace.
Yes.
And he's destroyed all walls of hostility. And so, now there's neither Jew nor Gentile, Galatians 3:28, male nor female, slave nor free. And we are all part of this new humanity.
Yeah, one new man. And then he goes on in Romans 11 and he tells us that one new man is grafted into the commonwealth of Israel, that we might be nourished by the seed line of Genesis 3:15 all the way back into this. And here we are, you coming from an Indian background, me coming from an Eastern European Jewish background. You are my brother, as if when we were 3 years old we took a knife and we became blood brothers. God made us blood brothers by grafting us into the same tree. But society has destroyed. And when I look at you, I'm not looking at an exterior image of God and this idea, well, God is yellow, black, brown, blue, green, gray, orange, purple. That's not what God is talking about, us created in his image. It is this internal, it makes you the same as me, and whatever I say to you, I say to his creation. Whatever I do to you, I do to his creation. And if I perpetrate a crime against you, it's a crime against God, because you're created in his image, and he is the one who's going to avenge that on your behalf. What have we done to humanity, and how have we lost? How have we lost the lines?
Yes, we did. It's interesting you said this, because as I was thinking back, just listening to you, thinking back to the time when I first came to the United States in the mid-1990s, the internet was just starting out, and there was this huge surge of optimism. There was this sense of a global world, a global village, so to speak. And, the European Union, there was just this sense that the borders are falling down and the world is coming together. And it's remarkable how, here I am, 20 years later, and there's all the divisions seem to be growing deeper, and it's not just here in the Western world, what's happening back in India between different groups. You think about the European Union, the Brexit there. Just the other day, I was reading an article by the recently elected president of Hungary, who wrote, the Roma people, this is his speech, he said, the Roma people are not really human. Just think about that, dehumanizing a group is the first step towards hating them and killing them and discriminating against them. So this guy is just standing up, and he's saying there's a part of the population of my country that they're actually not human. And then there are reports of Nigerians being discriminated against in South Africa, the Poles in Great Britain. So it's the sense of this nationalistic groupism, it seems to have spread all over the world. The pendulum has just swung so much in just 20 years.
Do you think that we impacted that through denominational division and denominational Christianity? 39,000 identifiable denominations of Christianity coming under two umbrellas, of course, the Catholic and the Protestant, but then they are even further subdivided within their own to be denominations, that we are we've allowed the great divider. You and I have nothing in common. I went to Penn State. I'm Jewish. I'm a Pentecostal, charismatic, spirit-filled Jew from Pittsburgh that received my postgraduate education through Messianic Seminary, specializing in Messianic Judaism, not in Christianity. Oddly enough, and you'll laugh at this, but I got a phone call saying we would like to have to debut on your program the lost writings of Charles Spurgeon. And I said, such an honor. Yeah. Would you mind telling me who he is? And they said, you don't know who Charles Spurgeon is. And I said, sorry to say I don't. And they said, well, we thought this was a Christian television program. I said, it is. I'm Jewish. I came to faith at 44 in a Messianic synagogue, and I've been involved in the Messianic synagogue and the Jewish believing community. I'm almost 67, so I've been in the Jewish community for 67 years. And I don't know the great expositors. People ask me, am I a Calvinist? And I say, no, I'm a Leviist. And they go, well, what do you mean? I say, well, Calvins are too tight in the seat. Levi's give me a little bit more room. And I don't understand all these divisions.
Right.
Because my mind says that from the two he shall make one. The binding together of our faith in Christ is all we need for you and I, for me to lay down my life for you. I don't care whether or not you sprinkle, splash, immerse, whether or not you swing a ball of incense or you anoint my head with oil. I don't really care about any of that. I care, do you believe that Jesus died for your sins? Do you believe in your heart and have you professed with your mouth? And that's all I need to know in order for you to be a member of my family.
Yeah. It's a very good point that you raise. I don't know if the denominational divisions have caused some of this, but I do know that, the segregation in the church is the reality. You go, Martin Luther King Jr. famously said, the most segregated time in America is 11 a.m. on Sunday morning. So it is that is an issue. And I think there is, though, given what we see in our world, there is a new awareness that's coming up in churches. And as I talk to the pastors and as I read in the media, there's a new awareness that's coming up among a lot of pastors and churches that we need to do more in this whole realm of reconciliation, is this whole realm of breaking down the walls of hostility. So whether it's Ferguson or Baltimore, so what's been so encouraging is to see that pastors of churches, taking the lead and coming into these communities and trying to bring healing, coming together. I'll tell you where I live. I'm a pastor at a church that is largely Caucasian, and it's because our demographics is that way, although it's changing fast. And what we have done is we have made some very serious, put some serious effort into building relationship with some inner city churches. And we have built a network where we have shared pulpits. I had the honor of preaching at the 135th anniversary of a African American church here in Frederick, Maryland, that was founded by 4 free slaves right after the Civil War. I mean, what an honor, Yes. And so our churches have, we shared pulpits. We often meet together and talk about, hey, how can we help each other grow? You teach us about urban ministry, and then let us come and help you however we can. Our elders have had joint meetings, and so we are kind of partnering. And our congregations, after several years of doing this, they've even started to kind of attend each other's churches every now and then, which is a beautiful thing. We actually did something remarkable a year ago. Now we do it like every year, is where we have their praise team come and lead our praise time, and our praise team that very weekend they go to their church and lead their praise time, and it's very different style, very different style. But it's creating this environment where we can have a dialogue and get to talk and understand each other, allowing the walls of hostility to break down. And that can only happen when we actually take the step to enter into people's world.
Well, isn't this really at the heart of this book you've written, Lost Lines, A Search to Find God's Script for Your Life? It's kind of a natural segue, because the lines in this case of the calling on each individual's life, and the purpose of life. I was taken to task by Dr. Jack Hayford, who I spent a very profound, very large block of hours with in a one-on-one dialogue, who challenged me and said, "What were you created to do?" And I said, "I was created to worship God." He said, "Okay." He said, "You have a very large congregation. Do all of your people know that they were created to worship God?" And I said, "Well, I believe I've conveyed to them that is the purpose, that we are called, that the origin of the word Jewish is from the word Yehudi, not from Judah, but from Yehudi, worshiper of God. That is the origin, and we were created to be worshipers of God." He said, "So have you shown them how to do it?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, do they know about true praise and true worship as it's defined in the Hebrew text?" And I said, "I don't think so." Then he said, "Then you go home and you teach them, because if people don't know how to fulfill their purpose, knowing your purpose is one thing, knowing how to fulfill it is another." So I actually went back home and wrote an 8-part series called The Anatomy of Worship, and I changed the service around where we would do praise in the first half. We'd have liturgy, because we were Jewish, then a praise set, then announcements and offering, and then we would have a worship set to kind of set the tone to prepare the heart to receive the message. So we changed the order of the service, and we still did the first part was praise, did the announcements and the offering, then we gave the message, then we went into worship so we could apply the principle presented in the sermon and actually apply it right then and there, as opposed to waiting till the next week to see if they remembered how. Well, that caused me to have to physically demonstrate. And so one of the concepts is called shachah, which is to bow down low and worship. I preached a 44-minute sermon laying flat on the ground.
Wow.
With the microphone curved so that I could be laying face down before the Lord, face down before the ark, preaching a message, bowed down low in worship.
Wow.
And it was extraordinary that when I then gave the altar call for us to enter worship, that everybody got up and laid down at the altar. And the whole worship time was done prostrate before the Lord. And I was going like, Pastor Jack is on to something here. Then the next week it was Hallel, which is praise, and singing, and I had to sing. So I had the pianist, and I was mic'd, and I had to sing solo in order for me to demonstrate that even with a bad voice, it's still, we're not a resounding clang and clanging cymbal to God. It's angelic to God. And when they replayed it, it actually sounded like Luciano Pavarotti was singing this song. And I'm like, Lord, you have performed a miracle, because I'm not a singer. but but when you play the recording, it's glorious, it's majestic, and it's because God honored it. And
Right.
so when you look at this calling, which is what you call lines, okay,
Right.
our purpose, our calling, and how we've gotten to this point of losing our way. Have we lost the it's almost, I think of like the queue at the airport. You and I have been to some really big airports in the world where there's long queue lines.
Right.
And if you're in the wrong queue line, you're going to wind up in the wrong concourse,
Right.
on the wrong airline, and you're going to find yourself, and especially in Paris, at Charles de Gaulle, you can wind up, I mean, like there's five terminal E's.
Yeah.
It's just the most confusing,
Yeah.
simple place in the world, and I've wound up in the wrong place 5 times there. Right destination, wrong line. So when I dug into this, I began to understand. So walk us through the story behind the title to give us an understanding of how you got to this revelation.
You know, it's interesting you talk about community. I'll just say this, and I'll tell you how I came up with this idea, or how this idea was inspired in me. You know, I make a strong case in this book that we can only live out our lost lines within the context of community. You know, there are no individual stories by itself. Each one of us is part of a greater story, you know. But several years ago, I think it was about 10 years ago, that I read a parable that was written by Soren Kierkegaard called The Prompter. And in this parable, he writes, it's a masterful little story, and he writes about how when people walk into a church, they think they are there to judge the preacher behind the pulpit. They're there to either praise him or pass judgment on him based on his performance. They think the preacher behind the pulpit is actually the actor. What they don't realize is that the preacher is not the actor. The congregants, the audience listening, they are the actors. And the job of the preacher is to stand on the wings, reminding them of their lost lines. So that just hit me so profoundly. It changed the way I looked at ministry. It changed the way I looked at preaching. It changed the way I looked at interacting with congregants. You know, every opportunity I get to speak, whether it's from the pulpit, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's in meetings or events, is an opportunity for me to remind people of their lost lines. It was so visionary. It was so profound. And so as I started thinking about this, ideas started popping into my head. You know, I started to look at all of the scripture stories and the narrative of the Bible, the story of God and Jesus, all through this lens of, you know, lost lines. And the book sort of started to get, you know, form out of that.
Well, it's you do a great job, and I think that we have kind of lost our way. I think some of the imagery you give about with your daughters at the store and looking at the magazines and the messaging and what the world is trying to conform us to do is taking our eyes off the mark. You know, it's almost where you become envious of Paul in prison because he has no distractions whatsoever. He has this clear path, this clear message. He actually is the author of distance learning. He writes a curriculum. He sends it off to the city. Everybody gathers around, learns from it, discusses it, responds with questions. He gives answers to the questions. It's really, truly the first model for distance learning. The first, and it actually worked. And communities were transformed, and they didn't have to be on site with the professors. So it's interesting. We were actually doing something about a new model for seminaries of distance learning and an analysis that it's as effective as being on campus and should encourage a broader base of people. And we had the discussion that Paul created distance learning. So it was kind of interesting. But your daughter's there looking at these magazines, and you know, you asking them, being the probative father you are, well, what message are you getting? What message are they sending you? And we know what that message is. And your kids go to public school, and they're getting messaging, and the lines are being blurred, and so we've lost clarity in understanding that. We're talking with Pastor Raj Pillai, author of Lost Lines, A Search to Find God's Script for Your Life. When we come back, we're going to dig into some of the text and really some of the haikus and the poetry. You continue to insert a lot of the poetic side of you that is really quite rich. It allows people to grab a hold of something that's not just a hard narrative, which is a unique style of yours that I've come to appreciate both in your first book and in this book, of a way of conveying a message that kind of puts it more in the applied than the theoretical. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back with Pastor Raj Pillai. Back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1 hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Pastor Raj Pillai, author of Lost Lines, A Search to Find God's Script for Your Life. Raj, welcome back to the program.
Thank you.
Raj, let's dig into the book a little bit. You write about the many different ways we're given the lines we've come to adopt and live in our world. How do we, it seems like it's more like the Matrix than it is clear lines anymore.
Yeah, right.
And we're at a lot of different intersects where, as a child of the 50s, we had clear paths. There were real clear lines. You were going to be a doctor, you did this. You were going to be a businessman, you did this. You were going to be an accountant, you did this. You're going to go in the family business, clear lines. My clear line was to become a rabbi. Okay, I hit a concrete barrier. Going 75 miles an hour. It was called my father. My father said, "What kind of job is that for a Jewish kid? You need to go out there and get a job." So that's actually a true story. At 13, I went to him and said, "I want to become a rabbi." "What kind of job is that for a Jewish kid? Nobody in this family is going to be a rabbi. So go get a job." But eventually, the dream came true 42 years later when I was ordained a rabbi. So these lines, what part in this is the God part, and then what part is this is our part, and how do we navigate the intersect?
That's a very, very good question. And you know, if you look at the way we live and the world we live in, I would say we live in a world which really is the greatest advertising ecosystem that the world has ever known. It's a marketing ecosystem. You know, all sorts of studies show now that you and I, depending upon our media usage and the kind of places we live in, we could be exposed to anywhere between 1,000 to 5,000 advertising messages every single day. Between 1,000 and 5,000 advertising messages every single day. There's all sorts of studies that's been done. There's actually a fantastic book called Consuming Kids, written by an author named Susan Lin, who writes that the American Advertising Association, they spend $15 billion a year advertising to our kids. So these lines are being broadcast and given to us from many different sources. I think your imagery of a matrix is a good one, because it's coming to us from many different sources. And it starts early, so the kids are getting it. In fact, in Consuming Kids, the author writes that by the time an American child hits its second birthday, they can actually ask for products with a brand name. By the time they hit kindergarten, they can actually they can identify up to 200 brand names. An average American child accumulates toys at the rate of 70 toys a year. 70 toys a year. You know, America has 5% of the world's children, but we consume about 60% of the world's toys. And then you go up to the teenage years and you find, you know, just this pervasive advertising and all sorts of lines that come at our teenagers. In fact, there was a poll done by USA Today along with Pew Research and back in 2007. that did an extensive poll of high schoolers in America, and they asked them, what is the biggest goal of your life? What is it you want to achieve? What do you want to become? And they said their biggest goal in life, number one, the most popular goal was to get rich. The second biggest goal among high schoolers in America, become famous. Get rich and become famous. Those are the two biggest goals. So where are they getting this from? You just see all the celebrity channels that they tune into, all the different screens that just beam all these messages to them. There was also a report by YWCA that talked about how the American cosmetic industry has this intricate plan on how to make the American girl and American woman a cradle-to-grave consumers. They want to make sure that right from the time a girl is a little girl, that they beam all these messages to them that unless you're using their products, you are not good. You're not beautiful. You're not beautiful enough. You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You don't measure enough. So all these messages are being beamed to our women. And then you look at what's happening, the state of men in America. Where do we find our idea of what it means to be a man? All these lines are being fed to us through media, through the kind of movies we watch, the kind of media we consume, the kind of books we read. I mean, there's just multiple channels that beam all these, all these different kinds of stories that you and I are supposed to live. And so to be able to navigate that and look at what is the story that I was meant to live, because the story that you and I were meant to live is sort of lost in the sea, in the matrix, like you pointed out, of all these other lines. And so, in fact, I'll tell you this, there's another study that was done, that was reported in Fortune magazine and Time magazine, that talked about, if you look at, some of the most habitual users of social media, Facebook, Instagram, and some of these other social media, Twitter, some of the heaviest users, they say, majority of them say that they're lonely. In fact, more than 50% of Americans say that they're lonely. What's so interesting is if you divide it by generations, the greatest generation, the boomers, the Xers, and the millennials, the generation that is the loneliest, interestingly, is the millennials. The highest number of millennials say that they are lonely. And that's because, you have this Facebook and Twitter and all this social media. It's not really real. It's just a storefront where we can put up display of who we want other people to think we are. We're not really going past the facade. And so in the midst of all this, these are kind of lines that are given to us. And it reminds me of that, passage in Proverbs 14:12, where it says, there's a way that appears to be right, but in the end, it leads to death. Yeah. And so, when we listen to these lines, somehow we know inside of us, it's not giving me what my soul craves. It's not giving me the kind of satisfaction, the kind of peace, the kind of joy, the kind of love that I want to experience, that I was created to experience. So there's a way that appears to be right, but in the end, it leads to death.
You talk about spiritual cognitive dissonance. You talk about a divided heart. You talk about an aching in our lives for the lost lines, but we don't even know what they are. Right. But we just feel unfulfilled. And honestly, we go to church on Sunday with a bless me pastor if you can attitude. Right. We go to our Bible studies with tell me something I didn't know attitude. We are not biblically literate in the West. We are biblically illiterate. It used to be that literacy, reading is fundamental, was a common practice, and we're graduating high school students that can't read. We're putting emphasis on church attendance, but Bible study, not. And when we talk about Bible study, it's like which small group is going to do this Beth Moore study, and which they're going to do this Beth Moore study or this Kay Arthur study. But the Bible doesn't say go to a Bible study to show yourself approved. It says study the Bible. So we should be studying the Bible, not studying the commentator. And so we've become lazy in our faith, lazy in our understanding, and we become desires of the sensational as opposed to the supernatural.
Right.
And that becomes the craving is, oh, I learned this valuable lesson in this Beth Moore, Kay Arthur, whoever. In my book, they're all the same, not one better, not one worse, they're just all the same. It's my opinion by this author, it's my opinion by that author. I write books. This, my opinion by Raj Pillai. I mean, we write books, is what we do. But do we take you to the point where we provoke you to the point of wanting a richer life with the Lord? That's what this is supposed to be.
That's right.
It's supposed to be. I didn't know that I was in the mirror aisle at the grocery store when I bought this book. But when I open each page, I should be able to see a mirror reflection and say, "Whoops, I'm not doing that. Whoops, I didn't know that."
Right.
And deepen my relationship and have it transformed. But we don't know, because the pablum which is being fed on Sunday is the same. Jesus saves. That's the billboard. It's still the same billboard. I only get you for 1 hour a week. I'm going to give you a salvation message, and and I'm going to throw a little life application in there, and that's what I get, and that's what I have to do. So how do we help navigate them back? How do you, in this book, because you do it, and you do it deftly, and you do it in a particular way, using a particular persuasive technique, whether or not you recognize that you did it or you didn't do it, whether you did it deliberately or you wound up doing it, let me give you a dignified title. A compassionate prodder.
Wow.
You compassionately poke me along. You poke me in a way along the way that I'm not offended, but you poke me as I navigate through this.
I like that. Thank you.
A compassionate prodder. So walk me through this understanding of okay, I recognize I've lost my way. I recognize I have a hunger. I don't know what I'm hungry for. I don't know, even in using my spiritual gifts. They have me counting the offering, and I really don't like church anymore. Well, what's counting the offering have to do with it? Well, because my gift is hospitality. And they got me in the back room away from people. I want to be out front shaking hands, so I don't like church anymore. I think I'm going to change churches. The pastor's message just isn't any good anymore. No, your gifts just aren't being used. You don't feel fulfilled. If you felt fulfilled and your gift of hospitality is being used, it'd be the greatest church in the entire world, and the pastor could be the worst pastor in the world. But unless we see these lines, and this is where you're getting us to, help my audience understand how you move us through this.
Right. So, one of the key phrases that I use in this, actually one of the key verses that I use in this book on how to move towards finding our lost lines is really the book of Romans chapter 12, specifically verse 2. And Paul makes it very clear. He says, do not conform to the pattern of this world. In other words, he's saying there is a pattern that this world is going to try to conform us to. And that pattern, as we just talked about, comes at us from a very young age, from multiple sources, from the media, from the screens that we expose ourselves to. And we live in this ecosystem where the patterns are all around us. It's the matrix, like you pointed out. And Paul says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but he says, be transformed by the renewal of your mind. So the transformation that we are looking for, or the lost lines that we're looking for, is to the renewal of our mind. And then we will know what God's will is, his good and pleasing and perfect will. So, and that I equate to finding our lost lines with. Finding out what God's will for me and for us is really what our lost lines are. So then, really, the battle is for our minds. And we have to recognize that there's a war raging in our mind. I mean, Paul says it as much when he says, there's a battle raging in my mind. And I tend to do things that I don't want to do. I don't do the things that I should be doing. There's a battle that's raging in my mind. So that's the first step. The second step is to recognize that God is very gracious and he is willing to share with us our lost lines if we ask him for it. In fact, all you have to do is just do a search on the internet for all the verses in the Bible where God says, call to me. I mean, it's just a simple phrase, call to me. I mean, there's just so many times that phrase occurs all throughout the Bible. One of my favorite verses actually is Jeremiah 33:3, where God says, call to me and I will answer you and show you great and unsearchable things that you do not know. In other words, God's saying, look, there's this thing that you don't know, and I'm willing to show you. I'm willing to give you wisdom. I'm willing to give you insight. I'm willing to remove the veil from your eyes. I'm willing to pierce through this matrix of lines that's all around you. I'm willing to do that, but will you call to me? Will you be open to listening to me? Will you open your heart and your mind to receive it? And that's something that's up to us. God leaves that choice to us. So recognizing that the battle is for our minds, calling to God, and then also living in recognition of his presence all around us. Sometimes what happens is we can compartmentalize our faith and our walk with the Lord as something that happens on Sunday morning, or maybe a few minutes of prayer that I pray in the morning, or a little bit of Bible reading that I might do every night, and that's my spiritual life. And then the rest of my life is the secular life. There's a division between the secular and the sacred. If we want to really live out a lost life, we need to remember that Jesus is everywhere. I mean, his promise to us is he's going to be with us until the end of the age. He will never leave us, never forsake us. And so what we need to recognize is that how do we invite Christ and his presence in everything that we do? So having breakfast with Jesus, being in commute with Jesus, going to work with Jesus. Before I walk into a meeting, I pray, Lord, would you give me wisdom to speak words of life and words of value to these people that are made in the image of God, as you pointed out in the first part of this interview. So all of these activities, how do I live and how do I do these things and think about these things and speak about these things, recognizing the presence of God all around me? He's here. I can live in a way that doesn't recognize his presence, or I can live in a way that recognizes his presence. And the more I recognize the presence of God and his work around me, the more I'll be in tune with the lost lines that I'm meant to live. So these are some ways. And then, the last thing I would say is that it's so interesting the way Jesus set up the church, right? I mean, we are meant to live in community. You pointed out in the first part of this program how you and I, we are connected. I am not some solo lone ranger out there. It's me and God going to save this world. It's us. It's all about us. And the way the community that Jesus set up, in this community, there's only one superstar. There's only one glorious inhabitant, and that's Christ. Other than that, none of us have a supersized role. Every role is important, So those that seem to have lead roles can't tell those that have supporting roles that their roles are somehow less important. We are all together in this. And I shared in a sermon with our congregation about this, and I told them we have grown quite a bit in our church, and we have a lot of new people. And I said, I'm specifically talking to you new people. If you don't step up and get involved and serve and get engaged with your time, talents, and treasure, our story remains incomplete, because there's a part of the story that only you can tell. And when we all do our part, the story of God emerges in an engaging, winsome, captivating way. But if individuals start to kind of peel off and not do their part, then there are these gaps in the story all over the place. So those are some ways, I extrapolate that in the book quite a bit, but those are some ways that you and I can get engaged and tune in to the one channel that really matters and live out our lost lives.
Well, you make it very clear that the eye can't say to the foot, "I don't need you," and that the hand
Right.
can't say to the leg, "I don't need you."
Right.
This is the summation of Romans 8:28. Is
Exactly,
that
yeah.
if I apply it to my body, you know, my head can't say to my feet, "Okay, my head's going to go left, but my feet are going to go right."
Yes. Yeah, and Paul makes that huge case to the Corinthians, and he says, "Listen, you guys, you're all about status, but really in the community of God, there isn't. We all need each other."
All of us need each other.
Right,
And the greater witness is this, is when Jesus said, "Let your light so shine that man would see your good works and bring glory to your Father in heaven." I see 2.5 billion candle power in a beam going up to heaven that the whole world sees and says, "I want to be drawn to that."
Right.
What we've become is 2.5 billion one candle power candles.
That's right.
And we've forgotten that if I share my light with you, the light doubles. I do not have to give up my light in order to help your light shine. I add to your light, and it's the compounding of the light. And this is actually your message in here, is that if you will find your light and join your light together, then your lost lines, okay,
Right.
our lines can now converge, which is what they're supposed to do. My lines and your lines are globally the same line, all right? But I have a part to do, you have a part to do. But when we put that light together, it should be brighter than you as an individual. Collectively, it should be like a moth drawn to a flame. What you're doing with the other communities, I commend, highly commend. I will tell you that I had great favor in the urban church, and I wanted to be the blue-haired lady. I wanted to be the pew jumper. The music excited me. It got me. It fired me up. That I actually called a friend of mine and I said, "I just want to come down for praise and worship, and then I need to run back and preach a message. But is it okay if I just come there, because I get so fired up? You can't sit down, you can't stop moving, and this is the most impoverished, broke, busted group of people that together, three of them couldn't get a car to work, but yet they're praising the Lord, they're wearing their Sunday best, and they're loving God with all their heart, with all their soul, and all their might, and they're bringing chicken, and they're bringing food to feed each other, and they're a family, and they've stayed together as a family, and nothing is going to divide them, and nothing's going to break them apart, and they provoke me to jealousy."
Yes. And what you just said, all this candle power coming together, it also reminds me, and like the story you just shared, Jesus said in John 13, when we live this way, when our lines merge and the story of God emerges, when all this candle power come together, people outside the community will actually look in.
Yes.
And say, now I know that this is real.
Yes.
They will
tangible.
You're my disciples because you love one another.
Right. Not because it's on the board.
Yes.
All right, out front. All right.
Yeah.
It's because they're seeing something. Okay, why is the parking lot filled at 10 o'clock at night? Why are the lights on? Why do I hear music? And why does it say on the board, instead of the Reverend Dr. Raj Pillai, it says all are welcome?
Right.
All right.
Amen.
Sign broken, message inside. That's what it ought to say.
Yes.
We've been talking again very enjoyably with Pastor Raj Pillai, author of Lost Lines, A Search to Find God's Script for Your Life. If you're searching for more meaning, for more depth, for more understanding of what God's purpose is for you, this is a book that's going to help you clear up a lot of the confusion, because there's a lot of lines out there, but they look like a cobweb. All right? A spider weaves a web with lots of lines in it, but it's a trap. And that's exactly what Satan is doing out there in the world today. There's lots of lines out there, but you get ensnared in that trap, you're going to have a hard way finding out. But you find your lifeline in Jesus, you'll find the line you lost, and grab a hold of that line, and that line's going to pull you out of the muck and mire of this world and pull you into a new life in Him. Raj Pillai, God bless you and thank you, my friend, for your time. May the Lord bless you and keep you and bless all the works of your hand.
Thank you so much for having me on your show.
God bless you. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.